Which whiskey are you drinking this week? And why?
Like, I only get one?
This weekend.
Yeah, we've got two or three.
I brought one for you for tonight called the Winter Nights Grand, 16-year-old MGP rye.
Well, and I've got a 21 and a 22-year-old bottle of Rhetoric open. I've got, what's that one I was, the Gifted Horse. I got one of those. I've got 80 bottles at my house. I've got 80 bottles.
Clearly not trying hard enough.
I'm trying pretty damn hard. I got it culled down from about 130, so. All right.
All right, this is probably addressed in the new book, what you're planning on getting, but can you discuss just briefly, for your older clients, say 50s and 60s, that you trained going on years, what does life gets in the way? What is the minimum generalization speaking? What is the minimum times they can train to maintain what you've built on?
Those people I want twice a week.
Twice a week?
Yeah. I don't really want them any more than twice a week. If they're over 60, twice a week's plenty.
Is that to maintain or to progress?
No, that's to make progress.
Okay.
And we don't do a bunch of volume with them either. Volume is what kills people that are older. So we go up and do a heavy squat, heavy set of 3 or 5, just one set and then quit. But drive that.
That's a pretty broad cast net for that age.
I think that works for most people, yeah. Depending on how much time they've got, how well they're sleeping. For that demographic, that's an extremely important question. You don't know this yet, but when you get to be 60, you won't be sleeping well. You'll get some sleep, but you won't be sleeping well. And this interferes with your ability to recover. And anybody you train that's 60 is going to have sleeping problems. Now, they may choose to medicate themselves, or they may try to just stubbornly fight through it and just go get by on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. But that really cuts into recovery. They might get one good night's sleep every 2 weeks. If they're males that age, they probably should be on testosterone replacement therapy. All right? And that will help quite a bit. But 2 days a week's probably enough for those guys.
You may have addressed it earlier, but I was going to ask, what is one book that everyone should read regarding to any topic?
What book should everybody read?
Yeah, like one particular book.
Besides mine? Oh, I don't know. I'm not into general literature. It's like, what whiskey are we drinking this weekend? You can't just say one book. I think that I certainly would not. I can't answer that. There's so damn many books that are good. I think the one book probably everybody ought to read is that one novel Robert E. Howard wrote, Conan the Conqueror. That's the one you ought to read. He wrote another one called Amalric. That was a good one too. Read that. As far as within this field is concerned, I really hate to say this. Well, Reynolds and I were talking about this last night. There is nothing in the strength and conditioning field worth reading. Really, there's not. Like, what would it be? It's just such a hash of just gibberish that I don't I don't see any point wasting a bunch of time on it. Now there's some, I think you ought to have Brooks and Fahey, just so you'll understand the physiology. I think that the best anatomy book that's accessible to people at our level is the Atlas of Human Anatomy by Frank Netter. There are a lot of good anatomy books, but I like that one the best. It's presented in a way that makes it very accessible. The best drawing I've ever seen of the shoulder anatomy, of rotator cuff anatomy, is in that book. And if you don't really understand it, read it, and you'll get a very good three-dimensional grasp of what the shoulder actually looks like, without actually having to cut anybody up to see it, I don't know. Book on general physiology, that's the anatomy text. Like I mentioned, Engineer to Win's a damn good book to make you think about the details of all kinds of processes. You got anything you want to add to that? Anybody on staff have anything they want to add to that? Nick, you got a favorite book?
Books in general?
I like Mountain Man by Vardis Fisher.
I'll tell you what, man, the best,
Death in the Long Grass.
yeah, the best book he's ever recommended is The Death of the Long Grass.
Death in the Long Grass. That's a hell of a,
What's happening in Africa. It's great.
you guys, that's a great fucking book, man. Death in the Long Grass. I've read that 10 times. It's a amazingly entertaining book. What else? I like Glory Road by Robert Heinlein. That's my most entertaining Heinlein book.
So earlier today, you and I talked about if somebody was really serious about wanting to specialize in the press, intermediate, trained in the press 4 days a week.
Yeah.
What would that look like as far as the differences in the reps, the sets? And I don't need like heavy specifics, just like a general idea.
Well, I think you probably ought to, you've got to do your fives. And then if I was going to specialize in the press, I would be doing triples or doubles another day of the week. And again, we're talking about an intermediate trainee here, not a novice. I would be doing 1 day a week from pins in the rack, partial lockouts, and then maybe a light day. Yeah, maybe not even eights, maybe just 80% fives, because the press is extremely dependent on, it's a lot more, it's real difficult to rescue a press that's out of position. You can wrestle a squat back into position, but you can't wrestle a press back into position. If you get it out there, it's over with.
What about utilizing like heavier push presses?
Push presses are not going to help your press.
Okay.
They will not help your press. The partial strength comes from the lockouts in the pin, but if you get used to using your knees in a press, you're going to do it on the platform. I wouldn't ever do push presses for the press.
Okay.
Push presses are a jerk assistance exercise, not a press assistance exercise. Okay?
I seem to recall hearing a couple of times this weekend that stretching is overrated, and
I think I said it was useless, not overrated. Let's be clear. It's a waste of time. It's not overrated. That's the polite version. But since it's just us talking here, it's useless.
so there's really not necessarily strength training related, but no really other circumstances.
If you do not have a range of motion issue that needs to be addressed with stretching, then stretching is a waste of time. Now, if you like stretching, enjoy yourself. If you like drinking Folgers coffee, drink Folgers coffee. If you like Bud Light, drink Bud Light. If you like to stretch, stretch. But let's not pretend that we're doing something good with either of those three activities. Okay? Yeah?
I think you touched a little bit on this earlier on the front row, but you and I recently had a recent conversation about my performance on a PT test after only doing the starting strength program.
Right. Right.
And I did well on that test.
And you made an excellent board post about that, too. Anybody read the board post he made about the PT? Well, describe it real quickly.
The test itself?
Yes. What you trained for, what the test was, and how you did.
The test consists of a vertical jump, a max push-ups in a minute with 40 being the minimum, max sit-ups in a minute with 37 being the minimum, a mile and a half run with 13:18 being the minimum acceptable, and then a 300-meter sprint with 60 seconds being the max allowed. The only training I did, starting strength. I didn't run. Matter of fact, I don't think I actually ran unless it was maybe after someone very shortly, for a year. So I didn't do any sprints, I didn't do any push-ups, I didn't do any sit-ups. There was a lot of guys that said, man, the run's gonna kill you. I actually believe that. So I also went from, I think when I started this last time, I was about 185, 190. I'm now 220, 221. So I expected to do poorly, or not really poorly, but I expected the run would kill me. So I started off doing my vertical jump. I believe that was, I remember it was 30, 32 or something.
Well, if it had a 3 in front of it, that's pretty good. For a guy your advanced age, that's pretty good. So, right, me too. Me too. I haven't matured in a long time.
One of the guys, of course, he was telling, he was talking to me. He said well, I bet at this weight you couldn't do a muscle up. I haven't done a muscle up in 2 years. So before the deal, I reached up, I grabbed up, I did a muscle up. I'm like, wow. So it came time to do the push-ups. I was worried I want to conserve energy, so I started doing push-ups. In 30 seconds, I'd reached my 40. I decided to stop. They felt super easy. I haven't done any push-ups. I was worried about those, so I just stopped. In about 40 seconds on the sit-ups, I'd reached my 37. I cut it off because I'm worried about the run. I'm conserving energy. Sit-ups are one thing that get people sometimes. We've always been told, hey, if you're not doing sit-ups, you're not going to do well in the sit-ups. Apparently, that's not the case when you're squatting.
No.
So, and then in the mile and a half, at the halfway point, I was exactly at 5 minutes and 30 seconds. So I slowed down intentionally because I wanted to conserve for the 300, came across the line at 12 minutes. And then I ran the 300-meter sprint in 52 seconds. So, past all that.
That's having done none of those things in preparation for doing those things.
At a much heavier body weight.
At a 35-pound heavier body weight. This is, and everybody goes, wow, but you know what? That's typical. This is normal. This is what we always see.
I wasn't sucking wind on the run.
We see this we hear this from all of our military guys that do this, right? This is the normal experience, okay? So, let me ask the question. Why are we still laboring under the delusion that we have to do endurance-based PT in order to pass the PFT? B, why is the PFT based on endurance stuff? When it's clearly not necessary to do endurance training in order to possess endurance. I don't know. Maybe that was your question. I can't answer this.
The question is how, because I think this obviously stems from the exercise. I know this is a trigger word for you, so I want you to sit there. I want you to calm down.
You watch my face. You watch my face. Watch my face.
I think this has to do with the exercise scientists. And I want to know, how do we change this? Yeah, keep it together. How do we change this? How do we make people realize this is the answer and not crunches?
Well,
Why on earth should you?
I think we should ask them nicely. We could say, we could send out an email to all of the exercise physiology departments in the world, and we could ask them nicely to pay attention to what we're trying to tell them. I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't work, do you? We could ask them nicely.
I bet the majority of the guys you work with still believe what you previously believed, you know, so.
The majority of the guys,
The better question is the guys that you work with, why do they still believe that?
the majority of the guys that saw him do that day still do not believe what their own lying eyes told them occurred, do they? People are extremely, that is a human nature question, and I don't know why people are not willing to think logically. Why are large swaths of the human population unwilling to think logically about almost anything? Very few things are they willing to think logically about. The day they get out of Algebra 2 in high school, they stop having to think logically and they revert back to superstition and tradition and feeling and all this other shit. And I don't know. I don't know. You're asking me a question that I can't answer. And I'll bet nobody else in here can answer either. You know, you can think of all kinds of disturbing and uncomfortable examples of that I won't bring up. But, I mean, the past 2 months have shown us, if nothing else, that people are not willing to think logically. And they're perfectly willing to continue thinking illogically, even in the face of proof to the contrary. So I don't know, Buck. Man, that's a great question. I don't know how you plan to fix it, though. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask them nicely. I'm going to try that first.